I'm Ken Kelly, and I've got a real burning passion for counselling skills. I've built training that takes the doubt out of using counselling skills. You get to see the counselling skills used in real live sessions by a qualified therapist. Full sessions, real material, real counselling skills. To find out more, go to counsellingskillsacademy.com.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you, Ken?
I'm well, thank you for asking, Rory. Delighted to be here and so glad that you've joined us, that you've tuned in for the Counselling Tutor Podcast. It's episode 224. 3 topics we're going to be covering today, starting with our Counselling Foundations, where we go back to the basics that underpin what we do as practitioners. And we're looking at life scripts from transactional analysis today. An interesting topic, one that I speak about often, and I see in myself so often. We then go into Focus on Self, where we recognize that we are the heartbeat of our practice. We need to be okay to be able to be there for others. And today we're going to be speaking about not being defined by the work that we do. And then we go into Practice Matters, where we look at an element of practice. And today we're speaking about narcissistic personality disorder. And we have our good friend Amy Launder, a regular contributor to the Counsellor CPD Library, and of course a regular guest here on the Counselling Tutor Podcast. So we know you're going to get some good value from there. Let's go to those foundations, Rory. Life scripts. What are they?
Well, it was back in 1972 where Eric Byrne defined something called life scripts. And life scripts are exactly what they say on the tin. They are a script that we live out due to basically the things we are told as children. And I'll give you a little example of this that I used to use when I taught. Many years ago, I was in a supermarket, a rather large supermarket, and queuing up to get my tea bags. And one of the assistants, one of the people who worked there, had brought her twin children in to show her colleagues, show off your new children. And they were in a little buggy side by side, and they were like 2 peas in a pod. You couldn't separate them. And she said, here they are. And this is, gave the name and said, and this is the good girl. And this is the one who's naughty. And I thought to myself, no, please, please, because that little child will, one of them will go, I'm good. And the other will say, I'm naughty. And if that, sometimes it's what we as parents do. We don't do it out of any malicious intent. But if that message is reinforced through the years, then that becomes a script, like an actor would use a script to portray a character. That's exactly what happens. And the things we're told as children then go on to form how we live our life. And I'm reminded of a very sunny May afternoon a good few years ago where I was explaining this. And one of my students said, no, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe that what you're told as children influences how you become. Absolutely not. And I don't have any influences on me, and I do as I want, and no one tells me what to do. And it went on and on and on. And I said, when you're little, what did your parents used to tell you a lot? And she said, you never do as you're told.
There it is.
And there it is. It played out, and honestly, if I could have slapped her across the chops with a wet fish, you couldn't have stunned a person anymore. And it was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And
it happens, and we get messages. A classic message, of course, is big boys don't cry. That was a message that I was told. When I was growing up, big boys don't cry. Be a brave little soldier. And, that kind of message is still echoes through male experience of showing emotion, and is so damaging. So life scripts can kind of influence how we live our life. And part of a TA therapist's job is to try and help the client get a new script on the road, play another part, think out past experiences, have influenced the here and now, and try and put a new script on the road.
Yeah. I like how you said it's like being an actor, having a script, having something with you, an invisible script that you pull out from time to time and play out. And it can be based on messaging from children, from being a child, as you've kind of covered there, Rory. It can also be based on life experiences that we experience and then surmise going forward it's going to be the same and that it's going to repeat and play out again and again. And it's interesting how the theories kind of overlap one another when you're speaking about those messages we get in childhood. We look to person-centered therapy. We'd look to introjected values, the values of another that we take as our truth and we live to that. And in transactional analysis, we have life scripts, which is similar in some ways. So I'm going to look at it in terms of you going through life and you, as a child, you witness your parents break up. So there is a breakup in your parents, and we kind of take out our little script and we go, okay, parents break up, and we write that down. And then you go along a little bit, and then you have your first relationship, the young love, and you're in love, and it's all going great, and then you get dumped, and you pull out your piece of paper and you go, hold on a minute, this happened to my parents. Look at this, theirs didn't last, and you write on there, and obviously this is all happening subconsciously. Breakup, relationship breakup, and then you go into another relationship, and after a few months, what happens? That breaks up too. The person leaves you. You get out your life script and you go, haha, here it is. I'm seeing the pattern. Whenever I'm in a relationship, the other person is going to leave me. And this is now the life script. This is now the life script, and this person goes on through their life, and any relationship they get into, when the person leaves, they take out the script and reinforce it. They get out a big red marker and go, yes, and underline it. You see, this is how it is. This is how life plays out. And what happens subconsciously is this person then starts acting in a way within relationships that will eventually force the other person to leave. Subconsciously, not knowing what they're doing, thinking, and it might be, well, I don't trust this person. I know they're going to leave. There might be great insecurity, and the person will eventually go, I just can't go on with you being like this. And the person will go, aha, you see, there it is. And there's an example of a life script of how it's written, how it's reinforced. And every time the script plays out, it becomes stronger and stronger. They're difficult to see because we don't see them. It's taking place subconsciously. When we do see them, we will usually defend them. But I just haven't met the right person yet. But it will always be externalized. And the work in TA is to recognize this is your life script. You're playing it out. And then only when we accept it is there an opportunity to maybe write it differently.
Yes, I really like that, Ken. Write it, rewrite your script. And it does speak to actually a school of TA called redecision therapy, which was developed by Robert and Mary Goulding, that combined areas of Gestalt and TA to help people put a new script on the road. The clue is in the name, redecision therapy, making different decisions and deciding that these old actions aren't getting us where we need to be. So we need to think of something new and working with that in therapy to develop a new life script. But I tell you what, Ken, sometimes it's not just parents who are people that we meet who can write our initial scripts. It's also society. Ken and myself are neurodiverse. We're both dyslexic. Ken has spoken quite often about being an autistic man. And the messages we got in childhood were that you couldn't read or write. Your penmanship, as they used to call it, can you believe they use words like that, wasn't good. And you were dumped in the, you were a bit thick. I was told on a numerous occasions I was a bit thick. And if I think of my life, I think, well, I'm a bit thick, I might act a bit thick. And I went through a great proportion of my life not really thinking too much of myself in terms of my intellect, because society, to some extent, because they didn't understand dyslexia and neurodiversity, had written me off, and I'd helped write myself off because I'd listened to that. It was only when I met someone into my 20s who said, no, you're not stupid, you're dyslexic. And I'm like, what's that? And it was only when someone pointed it out and said, actually, look at the things you're doing. You're quite capable. It's just that you don't do it in a traditional academic style. And that changed everything, Ken. You know, that led me on a path to go to college. I went back at 40 years old with no qualifications. And it led me to making a podcast with you, Ken. So sometimes rewriting our life script is really, really important, but it can be a difficult process because we've got to look at those past messages. I don't think it's sometimes very easy. From my own experience, I had to look at past messages and they came from all directions, Ken, and sometimes from people who should have been caring for you.
Yeah. Just what you shared there, Rory, it's so strong, it's so powerful. I wonder how many students say, oh, I'm not very academic. I'm not good at this kind of stuff. And I wonder where that comes from and what wrote that script. Because I certainly shared your script, Rory. I think I had my own copy. I probably photostatted it. Wow, there's a word you don't hear often, photostat.
Photostat.
I'm showing my age here. A copy of that exact same script. I didn't do well in school because of my neurodiversity. It was never picked up. I was labeled lazy and non-academic. I thought I'm not an academic. I can't do this kind of stuff. And I look now, and I qualified as a counsellor. I then qualified to teach. I have been involved in delivering supervision training, online and telephone counselling training. I run a training company with you, Rory, that trains.
You've written
I've
written
written
couple of
books,
Yes.
and I'm dyslexic. Oh, I can't write. I'm not good at writing. I'm an author, and I've written a book, and it takes challenging the script to get to that point. It takes challenging it, looking at it, and it's frightening to challenge a script. There's, you great with the remembering, Rory, who said what, and it's that all behaviour is goal directed.
Rogers.
Thank
that
you.
was 19 propositions.
Thank you.
13. There you go.
Thank you. I knew it was there in the theory somewhere. See, I told you I'm not an academic. Notice how he pulls out his script and underlines it in red. But it's now I can't even remember where I was going on that one. That's a great one. I've kind of hit a dead end there. But so the life scripts, we're playing them out. We don't see them. Oh yes, I remember what it is. It's that there is comfort in the script because we kind of go, well, I know what's going to come next. I'm going to submit that assignment and it's going to get referred and when it does get referred, it's like, you see, I knew that was going to happen anyway. If it doesn't get referred, it's not even noticed. It's not even noticed. There's I'm lucky I got through that with me not being such an academic. There's comfort because our behaviours are goal-directed in not challenging our script. It's tricky. But first it needs to be seen. It needs to be seen.
It does. And I think even the term academic is an interesting one, isn't it, Ken? Because it's almost like saying I'm not one of them. Anybody who writes an assignment and uses references and quotes books and comes to a conclusion is by default an academic. It's not someone with a gown and a cap who sits in an oak panelled room full of books with a pipe. Don't know where the pipe came from, but
Gotta have a pipe, Rory.
It's in my vision, so there we have it. And it's about saying it's about finding yourself, and it is really difficult. And I'm sure there must be some people listening to this who are saying, this sounds a little bit like me. This sounds like the kind of things I'm doing. And if that's the case, I would say, get yourself some help, get yourself some therapy. As my good friend Bob Cook would say, who's a TA therapist, get a new script on the road. And it's not easy to put a new script on the road, but once you're in a new part and you're playing a new part, then it becomes quite natural.
Yeah.
And quite easy to do, but that transition can be difficult. But as the famous Tony Robbins famously said, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
Yeah. And it's almost like we bring it into reality. We reinforcing and playing out. So you mentioned the actor. Once you've got that script, it's almost like I know what's going to happen in the future because it always goes like this. Yeah. It always goes like this. And we almost play a part that brings that about. We act in ways that kind of play out the script. One of my really strong scripts that I know I still carry this around with me today, and that is, people will always let you down if you give them enough time, Rory. They'll always let you down. It doesn't matter who that person is. They're eventually going to let you down. And, I look back at my life and I look back at my childhood, and there were some rocky roads there. And I guess it could be said that I was let down by my primary carers. And not that they didn't love me, but looking back and kind of living the life I did. And I guess the script may have started there. And I've used it all my life. And what that does is it kind of puts me in a place of, well, you can't really trust anyone because they're just going to let you down eventually. And I'll play out this script, and every time that somebody says they're going to do something and they don't do it, or says they're going to arrive at a certain time and they don't arrive at that certain time, I'll take it out and go, you see, you just can't trust people. If you want a job doing, you got to do it yourself. And I know it's a script, and I know it's linked into my attachment style as well, but it is there. I'm challenging it, I see it, but it's still really hard. And I've been married to Colette now for 22 years, and that took some adjustment of my script. Let's put it that way. It took some adjustment of my script to trust another human being so fully,
It is interesting, and you're absolutely right. There is a second order consequence to life scripts, and that is attachment. And I think that when we become stressed, what happens is we're liable to go back to our old life script. And I think part of that is seeing that stress and saying, "Whoa, got to be careful here. Got to be careful here." And it's really strange. I'll let you into a little secret. When I say we record on the Zoom platform, because we're separated by about 40 miles, I think, as the crow flies, Ken and myself. I'll sometimes come in a little earlier to the Zoom room and wait. And when Ken pops up, I'll go, he's turned up. and there's a little part of me that goes, what? Why would he do that? And it's the same with everyone. When that little bar at the top comes, it says Ken Kelly's entered, or whoever it is, I go, that's remarkable. It's almost like I really don't get why people would turn up.
Yeah, because the script says otherwise, doesn't it? They're going to let you down. They're not going to be there. They're not going to show up. Yeah. Yeah.
And if somebody's a few minutes late, I literally start getting really nervous. And then when they pop up and they go, I'm sorry, I'm a little late. It's like, oh, right, that's okay. But for all I know, and for all the training and all the therapy I've had and all the personal developments I've done, I still get that feeling, and I still have to address it and call it out and go, come on, Rory, this is just an old piece of your script. Let's get it going. And some days it's easier to do than others, if I'm honest, Ken. I don't know about you, but some days I can just dismiss it. Some days it's like, oh, it really gets me.
Yeah, very much so. And maybe you're listening to this and you can relate to it at some level. I wonder what script you might carry around, what scripts you might see along your training process from peers, what scripts you may see being brought into your therapy room. And I guess understanding it, reading about it, developing ourselves and our knowledge is empowering. And we've got a handout for you on life scripts, and you can grab that. It's free. You just go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, navigate to episode 224. That's today's podcast, and there it is on the page. We can put in your email address and we'll send you the handout on life scripts. And if there's anything that I would like to give as a gift, it is that if you can see your own life scripts and start working on them, there is amazing personal growth in life scripts. I think it's Absolutely. A lovely little theory. It's so neat, and it makes so much sense to me. And I literally in my head see myself silently pulling out my script and my little red pen and going to underline it. And I can stop myself in that motion and go, hold on a second. This is circumstance that this other person is not here or whatever it is. And I can rationalize it. Put the pen away, Ken. Put the pen away. And not underline that script just to challenge myself.
Yeah, I always say to myself, come on, Rory, you're not 6, you're 64.
Yeah.
You know, which kind of takes me away from that child place the script was written in and brings me into the here and now and very much the adult ego state, you know. So, but it is interesting, isn't it, how we're defined by our history, Ken? Indeed.
And more than one theory suggests this. So there it is. That is our Counselling Foundations. That underpins us and our training, learning to become counsellors. We now move on to that focus on self, where we recognise you're the beating heart of your practice, and we need to be okay in ourselves to be able to be there for others. And it's very easy being a counsellor to be defined by the work you do. Somebody says to you, oh, who are you? You might say, well, I am a counsellor, and you're defining yourself by a job role or title. But we can also define ourselves by the work that we do. And I guess there is a challenge within that, Rory.
Yeah, there is. I think there is a challenge. And I think that, the training and practice, it can become all encompassing.
Yeah.
And eventually we see ourselves only in the work that we do. So when people say, who are you? Then we might say, oh, I'm a counsellor. But is that all you are? Isn't there a lot more? And in fact, I've recently had some coaching, and what we had to do was write a personal statement about ourselves. And one of it was, "Who are you?" And I wrote, "I'm a father, a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a business owner." And I put the business owner at the end. I put them in the order of importance. And that was really, really useful, because it reminds me that I have other commitments. I play other roles in the world, and I think it's very easy to get over defined by who you are if all you do is work, because you'll only meet people who are doing the same work, and eventually you just think of yourself, I am. And it's that kind of societal thing as well. If you go to a party now, we can, in post-COVID world, we can meet people. People usually say to you at some point, what do you do? In other words, they're saying, are you the same kind of person as me? And I think it's really interesting how people react. They usually talk about the jobs. They won't talk about themselves. They won't say things like, what do you do? Well, I'm a grandfather, and I kind of play with children and have fun and buy ice creams and that type of thing. People would usually say, well, I'm an accountant, or I'm a bricklayer, or I'm on whatever job we are. Don't get defined by your work. Be defined by who you are, is my message.
Yeah, that's a great message. It's so tricky to live by it. And we get captivated by our work, and we may love what we do, and when we look around us, we may see that our friends are also peers. They're also involved in the same kind of things that we do. We may find that the interest groups that we hang out in also share the interest of the work that we do. And it's about where is that balance? Where is that balance? And it doesn't matter what work you do. Like you said, Rory, it could be, I'm an accountant. You'd be in all the Facebook accountancy groups then. I'm not in any.
No.
So as counsellors, I think that this takes it a step further, because when we define ourselves by what we do, think about it, when we are a counsellor, when we're in the role of a counsellor. Now, first of all, we're told it is a way of being. It's not what we do, but it's who we are, which is interesting in itself. So we're in the role of a counsellor. We're maybe taught that we must have unconditional positive regard. And then what happens when you kind of get yourself in a situation where somebody pulls you off or takes your parking spot in a car park? Do we then go, I can't feel that anger that is building up in me now, or that frustration, pick an emotion that is building up in me now, because I am a counsellor, and I view everybody without judgment, and they're just being who they are, or do you go, well, I know what I do.
Yes.
And it, it tends towards the side of things. And I guess there is a challenge in defining ourselves in a certain way, because we cannot live up to that. We can't be that all the time. And when we may then feel that we're letting ourselves down, that we're not being who we're supposed to be. I can't feel like this because I'm a counsellor. Well, you're a human being. You're a human being first.
Yes, absolutely. And, I've got a picture kind of maybe, stood in your house with rain pouring through your roof and phoning the builder up who's supposed to come to re-roof your house, and them saying, well, I've had some difficulties, and you're saying, oh, I understand that. Never mind that, get a tarpaulin up, get some slates up. I don't want wet carpet.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. We may, through the arc of our work, become more empathic, more understanding, more non-judgmental.
Yeah.
But I've always said it's a volume control. It's like a volume and treble and bass control on your hi-fi system. You can turn them up and you turn them down. And there are some times where, quite frankly, I've not been very empathic, and I've been incredibly judgmental and given people a piece of my mind.
Yeah.
And sometimes I haven't got a problem with that. I might kind of retrospectively think, well, if it was a bit too harsh, but once the deed's done, the deed's done. But I think it's very, very important that we see ourselves as holistically and not just define ourselves. And, when I worked with in addictions, I worked in a hostel for a time as a support worker. I met wonderful, wonderful people who were working with people who were going through quite a lot of difficulty, and by that being difficult in the way they behaved. And I know a lot of them burnt out because they could only see themselves in one aspect. And I think, embrace all of you. That would be the message. Embrace every bit of you. And next time someone asks what you do, take the advice of one of my former students who said, who was a very well qualified mental health worker before she trained to be a counsellor with me many years ago. And she tells people she was a secretary. Her words, she said, I'm a secretary. And she said, I have a nice, quiet life. No one asks me anything.
Yeah, how you define yourself is so important. And when we define ourselves with elements of our work, it's challenging, and it can be something that we carry. I was contacted by a really good friend just recently, and this really good friend has done a little bit of counselling training, and he was sharing that he finds it difficult when those around him, his friends or acquaintances, may be going through a challenging time, to not kind of slip into that mode of I should be helping here, I could be helping here. How should I say? What should I do? How should I listen to this person when they bring me this? That when the people are sharing their challenges from life, and what he was experiencing was that being defined by the fact I've done a little bit of training, I know all of this, I should be acting differently in these kind of conversations. And he was sharing, there are times that it's actually just quite frustrating, and he wished that they wouldn't reach out to him. And that is I guess being real. And I think that the challenge here is, what is your balance? What do you do to hold the balance within your life? What are your downtime activities? How do you switch off? What do you do? What are your hobbies? And it's interesting, on so many forms is what are your hobbies? And people will write things like watching television. But that's kind of a hypnotic pastime where you sit there and turn down. What do you do that is an interest outside of your work? Even if you're studying, it can be all consuming. It can take up so much of your waking moments just with thoughts of what it is that you do.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And it just reminds me, what are your hobbies? I remember that was the first question I was asked when I went for my counselling placement nearly 20 years ago. They said, and I thought, what a strange question. I'm coming here to be a placement counsellor, not to talk about my hobbies. But now, of course, with hindsight, I realised he wanted to make sure that I had more dimensions, that I was a multi-dimensional person, as opposed to a one-dimensional person. And It really is. It really is so important. And I also think, Ken, that when you do the work we do, we tend to make friends with people in our profession who do the same kind of work. We kind of gravitate towards like-minded people. And I'm honestly struggling to think of the amount of friends I've got who aren't therapists. I can think of a few, but majority of them are. And it's noticeable when we meet up, we'll talk about all sorts of things and not therapy. We'll make a point of talking about our kids or where we're going, or someone was buying a new house the other week. We were talking about that, and trying not really to go onto that therapeutic land, so that there was more to us. We were multidimensional.
Yeah, and we bring this topic in service of focus on self, but it is also in service of our clients, because we may have a client who is coming in and is defining themselves by what it is that they do. And to kind of close it off, Rory, I was speaking to a friend recently who is also a colleague, also in the counselling world, and we were talking about our shared enjoyment of Star Trek.
Oh, no. Well, that's all flipping, I can't say that, flipping therapy as well, isn't it? I mean...
Yeah, I can hear the beeps now. Beep!
Beep! I think I got away with it.
Yeah, you got away with it. Nobody noticed, Rory.
No, but no one had noticed. But yes. And, I could talk about how there's very close connections between therapy and Star Trek, given enough time. But I guess that is a outside interest, isn't it? Yeah. That's nailed it. You're absolutely right, Ken.
There it is. That's focus on self. And we now move on to practice matters. That's where we look at elements of practice. We anything from running our practice and the day-to-day business of a practice, or presentations that may come to us within our practice. And Rory, you met up with Amy Launder. Now, Amy Launder is a good friend of Counselling Tutor. She has a number of lectures in our Counsellor CPD library. But the topic is an interesting one: narcissistic personality disorder.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Amy is a firm favourite with people who view the lectures. That people wax lyrical about Amy's delivery style and the topics that she brings. But yes, a narcissistic personality disorder is always seen in quite a negative light. It's kind of bandied about as almost people being bad, or sometimes even the word evil is connected with it. But it is a struggle for people. Having a narcissistic personality is a struggle, and sometimes people go to get some help with it and try to alleviate the more florid symptoms of it. It is a very, very difficult presentation. And I spoke with Amy Launder about how therapists work with narcissistic personality disorder, and this is what she had to say.
Practice matters.
The National Counselling Society is proud to sponsor Practice Matters. National Counselling Society are really excited to have launched their Children and Young People Therapist Register for counsellors working with the younger age group. To find out more, visit nationalcounsellingsociety.org. nationalcounsellingsociety.org.
And we welcome back one of our regular presenters, Amy Launder, who's done a fantastic lecture on narcissistic personality disorder. Amy, welcome back.
Thank you for having me again.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. The term narcissist is used a lot in modern parlance, a lot of vocabulary, isn't it? But there is a big difference, I think, between someone having narcissistic traits and someone having narcissistic personality disorder. Maybe we could start with that. What are narcissistic traits?
Yeah, I mean, narcissistic it's the same with any diagnosis, I guess. People can have some of the symptoms or some of the traits, but not necessarily enough to meet the criteria for a diagnosis of a personality disorder. But I suppose the way that I would differentiate it is narcissistic traits they can come and go in a person, maybe depending on the situation they're in or what's going on at that point in their life, whereas a personality disorder is more enduring. It's part of their personality, their makeup as a person, so it doesn't necessarily come and go like traits might.
Okay, so if we're thinking about traits, and there's a lot of this discussed in popular psychology magazines, isn't there? Mm-hmm. What are those traits? How would we kind of think, I wonder if this person has narcissistic traits?
Yeah, so someone who thinks very highly of themselves, thinks that they're better than people around them, thinks that other people are jealous of them, or becomes very jealous of someone who they believe is better than them, which is very rare for them to believe someone is better than them. But they will identify someone who they think is better than them, and they will think that they themselves should be associated with that person. So they want to be associated with people who they deem to be of equal level or higher than them, so that they can then raise themselves as well and look down on anyone else who they don't deem to be of their level.
Yeah, so somebody who may look up to a sports person or a personality and say, I want to be like them. And it must be really difficult if you're in a relationship with someone who has narcissistic traits. How might that play out in terms of the person in the relationship?
Yeah, well, that's actually how I became interested in narcissistic personality disorder, was clients having been in relationships with someone with narcissistic traits. And it comes across in the person who has been with someone who's narcissistic ends up very confused about the relationship, about kind of feeling like they've done something wrong, and that's why the relationship has ended, or that's why the person has been so horrible to them. Because the narcissist in the relationship will do everything to break their partner down, to make their partner easier to control. So they're very sarcastic. They use gaslighting a lot. So they'll say horrible things and then say that you're too sensitive or you're overreacting, and claim that it was just a joke or something like that. And if the partner tries to leave the narcissist will do everything they can to kind of hoover them back in. That's actually the term that is used in narcissistic research, is hoovering. Only for the narcissist to then leave them when they decide it's time, and will do everything at that point to break them down even further and make them feel unlovable, because they want to win the breakup, which is a very strange thing to think of, winning a breakup. But they want to move on first, move on better, and make sure that their partner can never move on from them.
Yeah, yes, and I watched your lecture, and I have to say it's absolutely fascinating. And one of the things that struck me was that a narcissist may initially meet someone, and some of their traits may be very appealing. And I think one of the things you gave an example of was, someone might have a really good job, and they meet someone and say, "Oh, this is really good, you've got a good job." And then as time goes on, they say, "Well, it's your job that's the problem, because it's interfering with our relationship."
Yeah, definitely. And it goes back to what I was saying before about they want to associate with people who are higher than them, because they want to, in a relationship terms, they want to show off to their friends, look who I got as a partner. But then that becomes threatening to them, that their partner is seemingly higher than they are in some way. So then they try to break that part down. So it's a never-ending cycle of wanting someone who's better than them, but then feeling threatened by that, and they keep going.
Yes, and like you, I have worked with people who have had partners who have been narcissists, and I think it's very easy to demonize people with this difficulty. But before we started recording the conversation, our podcast, we discussed the origins of narcissist and the Greek god who, I mean, maybe you want to tell that story, because I thought it was a fascinating story of the reflection in the water.
Yeah, of course. Well, there's a lot of different retellings of it, but the best one that I've come across is that Narcissus thought so highly of himself that he believed no one else was worthy of his love, and actually to the point where a lot of people would end their own life as to try and prove their love for him. He was eventually punished by the gods and made to fall in love with his own reflection in the water, so much so that he couldn't even pull himself away to eat or drink, and then he eventually died. So he became victim of his own narcissism, and that's where the term originally came from.
Yes, and I think that for people who have narcissistic personality disorder, maybe we'll just kind of try and separate that from people with narcissistic traits. And that must be very, very difficult. That they must struggle with that too, because you said that the person, the Greek god or the Roman god, I think it was a Greek god, died because they were so infatuated with their own self that they neglected a bigger part of them.
Yeah, definitely. And actually the best modern version that I found of that is, I don't know if you've watched Suits, or anyone listening has watched Suits. There's a character called Lewis, and he's a lawyer, and he can't get out of his own way, because whenever he feels that he's been slighted, even though he can see the bigger picture, he will do everything he can to get revenge, and that ends up knocking him down again. So he can't get out of his own way, because the idea that someone thinks poorly of him just can't compute, and he, ends up destroying himself just to try and save his reputation.
So as with the Greek god narcissist, that person destroys themselves as well. So that kind of brings me on to my next question. What is the difference between someone who has narcissistic traits and someone who may have a narcissistic personality disorder?
Yeah, well, I think it goes to the diagnostic criteria and how many of the traits do you actually have and how enduring are they. And the difficulty is that a lot of people who have narcissistic traits or narcissistic personality disorder don't present themselves for treatment or diagnosis because they don't believe there's anything wrong with them. So it's normally in other people presenting someone, like we've just said with our clients who have come with having been with narcissistic people. So yeah, it's very difficult to diagnose and treat because they don't turn up for treatment.
Yes, because they think there's nothing wrong with them. It's everybody else that's the problem.
Yeah. And when they do turn up for treatment, they turn up to rant about how everyone else is against them and the world is out to get them. So
that again then what makes me wonder, is it something that is treatable, or is it something that people may just have to live with?
Yeah, well, like with lots of personality disorders, I would say it's not necessarily treatable, but it's manageable through something like therapy.
Yes.
But very difficult, again, because they don't want to turn up for treatment most of the time. And when they do, they want a therapist who is going to always agree with them, who's not going to tell them anything new about themselves, because that injures their ego, the idea that someone else knows something about them that they didn't already know. So they're very difficult clients to work with.
Yes, and it cannot be easy to have any form of personality disorder. And I know people who really do. I think a lot of people would struggle to have a personality disorder. The origins of a narcissistic personality, where would we find that? What kind of conditions in an earlier life would cause someone to develop a narcissistic personality?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there's nothing definitive about where it comes from. There's a lot of theories about, maybe it's when parents treat a child as very special, as they're growing up, and so they never really grow out of this idea that they're not special or that they don't deserve everything that the world has to offer them. Other theories are kind of the complete opposite, that they were not treated as special, or something traumatic happened to them and they became it, and they believe they're special for that reason. So there's not really any definitive idea of where it came from. There's lots of theories. So
there's lots of theories, but there's no actual research. So I guess what I'm hearing is we're more likely in our therapy rooms to encounter people who have been, I'm going to use the term very thoughtfully, victims of someone with a narcissistic personality than somebody who is who has a narcissistic personality, because by the very nature of it, they think there's nothing wrong with them. So thinking about those people who present, how do we help them? What insights can we gain to be able to help someone who's clearly being gaslighted or is a victim of someone with a narcissistic personality?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of psychoeducation and validation that needs to happen with someone who has been the victim of narcissistic abuse, purely because they've been made to believe that they are the ones at fault or that there's nothing actually bad happened and that kind of thing. So yeah, the main bulk of the work is psychoeducation, validation, a lot of patience, a lot of, I think the research says that a victim of abuse will return to the relationship on average 7 times before fully kind of leaving. So there are, your client might end up going back to the relationship and back out again whilst they're in therapy, or they might have already done that and now they're in therapy. So yeah, a lot of patience and understanding, but also pointing out the red flags maybe that they're not seeing at the same time.
Yes, and the one of the things that I know from my own practice when I've worked with clients who've been quite clearly in a relationship with someone who has narcissistic traits is the fact they're not the person with the traits isn't going to change. Mm-hmm. That I don't know how often you've heard this, that and I'm going to use the word he because it usually is a he, but I acknowledge that women can have narcissistic traits as well. But he's changed, and it's usually, isn't it, when the partner feels stronger that the danger lies, because they feel stronger. They feel at that point they can control the person, and of course that's not the case. Is that your experience?
Yes, definitely. So there's always this idea of there's going to be a better day. The person has changed, and there's actually a cycle that once I noticed it, I started recognizing it in a lot of clients, where when the client leaves the partner or threatens to leave, the partner then goes back to this, what it's called the love bombing or honeymoon stage, where they're super nice and buying presents and taking them out for dates, and that's what hoovers the partner back into the relationship, and then they go through the whole cycle again and get to the point of devaluing and all of these things. So but actually, interestingly, there's research that says that the brains of people who have been victims of narcissistic abuse or any abuse like this is similar to kind of gambling addicts, because it's that idea that it's like intermittent reinforcement. So you never know when the next good day is going to come, or you never know when the win is going to come on the slot machine. So you keep going to see when that's going to be, and you get addicted to that relationship even though it's not good.
How absolutely fascinating. What do you hope that people who watch this lecture will take away from it?
I think that there's a difference between being a narcissist and having narcissistic traits. Not everyone who has narcissistic traits is a bad person. There's research that the prevalence rates of narcissism in the general population are 0 to 2% or something, but in the medical profession it's about 17%. So it's not always a bad thing, and it can be used in a good way, but it's when it gets in the way of that person's life or the partners and children's lives that it becomes an unhealthy thing.
Well, I have to say, Amy, I get the privilege of watching the lectures before they're actually broadcast, and I have to say I was absolutely riveted by it. It's if you're interested in this type of thing, or your clients presenting, it really isn't a lecture to be missed. So, Amy Launder, thank you so much for joining us.
Big thank you to Amy Launder. Thank you to you, Rory, for hosting that interesting interview, bringing it to our podcast and our listeners. And of course, if you want to listen more to Amy Launder and see her lectures, including the lecture on narcissistic personality disorder, you can do so in the Counsellor CPD Library. It is a library for qualified practitioners, and you can get more information on that by going to counsellingtutor.com. This has been episode 224 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
Yes, we started with Counselling Foundations, life scripts in transactional analysis, how those early childhood experiences form a script that we live to and sometimes need to change. Then we moved on to focus on self, about not being defined by our work, being the whole of us, not just the work we do. And then we moved on to practice matters, an interview with Amy Launder, where she talked about narcissistic personality disorder. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
If you're a qualified counsellor or psychotherapist, then why not check out the Counsellor CPD Library? Stay current with your CPD requirements with over 150 hours of academically rigorous, on-demand lectures you can stream to your device. Joining Counselor CPD will expand your skill set to create a more specialised, highly rewarding practice. For more information on the Counselor CPD Library, visit counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.